In this video, I'd like to talk about how to solve quadratic equations by factoring. So we start off with this example here, and the general strategy is that we will try and factor this into two binomials. So each of these have two terms, and they're multiplied together, and they'll be equal to 0. And then from here, we can use our zero product property, which basically says that if one of these things, these expressions in parentheses, is equal to 0, then 0 times anything is equal to 0. So we'll be able to find two different solutions for this. In fact, the fundamental theorem of algebra states that the number of solutions in your equation, your polynomial equation, is equal to the highest power of x. So in this case, the highest power of x is 2, which means there are two solutions. If you had something like x to the fourth plus a bunch of other terms equals whatever, let's say 0, then there would be 4 solutions to this. Sometimes they're real numbers, sometimes they're imaginary numbers. So with this quadratic, we're looking for 2 solutions to this equation. And sometimes actually you find the same solution twice in a sense, and we might see that. So let's just jump right into the problem. We're going to rewrite it. X squared plus 10x plus 25. And there are a couple different ways you can factor this. You can factor it with the reverse FOIL method, which is what I'll use here, or you can factor it by grouping. So it's going to factor into these two binomials multiplied together. So each of these have two terms. And remember the FOIL method. When, let's say you have x plus 2 times x minus 3. When you multiply these out, you do the first ones, x times x, so that's x squared. Then you do the outer ones, x and minus 3, so that's minus 3x. Then you have the inner ones, which would be the 2 and the x, so plus 2x. And then you have the last ones, the plus 2 and the minus 3, so that'd be minus 6. So essentially, we're starting here, and we want to go back to this. And I should note, FOIL is a useful way to remember how to multiply these, but if you ever have more than 2 terms in each expression, FOIL doesn't work. So you could also just think about it as you're distributing here, or essentially each number here multiplies to each number over here. But we are going to essentially do this FOIL method in reverse to factor this. And so notice that the first terms, the x and the x, made the x squared term. So we're going to have x and x for our first terms because they're going to multiply to become x squared. And then notice that the last terms, the plus 2 and the minus 3, give us the constant term, this minus 6 here. So that would be the positive 25 in our case. And so we need to think which numbers multiply together to give us 25. Could be 1 and 25. They could also both be negative. We do have to consider that. And it could be 5 and 5, or minus 5 and minus 5. And the last step is to recognize that the outer and the inner terms right here, when we simplify this in this expression, this would be minus 1x or minus x. The outer and the inner terms combine to give you this term with x in it. So x to the first power. So to get this, we want to ask ourselves which of these factor pairs would add up to the coefficient on x. So which one of these pairs would add up to positive 10? And in this case, it would be 5 and 5. So we can put plus 5 into each of these. And so now we've factored this equation. Let me just rewrite it. We have x plus 5 times x plus 5, and this is equal to 0. And from here, we'll use our zero product property. So if either this expression or this expression is equal to 0, then the entire equation is equal to 0. So you want to think which x values can you plug in here and here so that the expression would be equal to 0. And in both cases, x would be negative 5. So in either of these, if you plug in negative 5, then you get 0 times 0 actually. Usually it's 0 times some other number, but 0 times 0 is also equal to 0. So this is one of those rare cases where you actually only get one answer, but it's like you get the same answer twice. And when you go further in algebra, we actually call this a double root. So technically, we still do view it as two answers, even though it's the same answer twice. But regardless, x would be -5 here. So I'm going to use a darker color. So you'd put -5 into the box, and you can check it. So this is a step that you can always do. Plug -5 back into the original equation. So we have -5 squared plus 10 times -5, and then we'll add 25. So -5 times -5 would be a positive 25. And then this is -50, and then plus 25, and that would actually give us 0. So we can feel confident that this is the right answer.